My family's from the Kainai Nation, the Blood Tribe. I'm an alcoholic. Being the grandchild of a residential school survivor was very challenging. I grew up in a household of alcoholics and drug addicts. I had no one to talk to, no space that was safe for me, except for my grandmother. I think music is the thing that separated me from a lot of my friends and people I know that have the same issues but are no longer here today. Wanting to die but not being able to kill myself. It wasn't until my 6-month-old child and my wife were leaving that I decided that it was time for me to get help. I didn't want to be the father that I didn't have.
All right, this is our very first YouTube exclusive live stream. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. That was tonight's guest, Forrest Eaglespeaker. I'm Daniel Unmanageable, and this is Hard Knox Talks, coming at you from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Treaty Number 6 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis people. Before we bring in Forrest, I just want to remind our viewers to stay to the end for a powerful sneak peek at Ryan Bathgate. Next week's guest, Ryan has a mind-blowing philosophy on healing, so stick around to the end for that. Let's bring in Forrest. Forrest, how are you?
I'm doing good, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Forrest is a return guest. Forrest was on. I would say you were in probably the first 20 guests of Hard Knox Talks, I would have to say. I think you were one of the first guests that I had in the studio space that I'm in now. I was still on the little laptop, but lots has changed since then. So, yeah, I'm glad to have you on tonight. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we get started?
I mean, I'm just happy to be back on. It's really great to see how far this show has come and how much work you put into it on the back end, and you know, just not even just the show itself. You know, like we have a lot of stuff in common with the recovery and with being a partner and a husband and being a parent, and like, you know, it's. You know, a lot of people, they see the couple little clips that we post and, you know, our photos we put on Instagram, Facebook and stuff, not understanding all the stuff that's going on behind. So, like, I see you and I respect what you're doing, man.
I appreciate that. For anybody who might not know, Forrest is the lead singer and creator, correct? Creator?
Yeah, correct.
Of the award-winning Saskatchewan band, the North Sound. And, yeah, it's quite a ride you're on, man, going to Nashville and all that, but we're going to get into that. So without further ado, let's jump right in.
This is Hard Knox Talks.
Okay, before we jump in tonight, I just want to let our viewers know that tonight's premier sponsor is Stronger Together Canada, peer-led support groups by Mums Stop the Harm. We're going to learn more about that growing national support system for loved ones of people who use drugs in just a little bit. I'm sorry, I stumbled all the way through that. Donna just let me know that she can't hear Forrest, and I'm going to fix that right now. There. Okay, let's bring Forrest back in now that Donna can hear him. Sorry, when tech things go sideways on the live stream, it's like boom, deer in headlights. Like, oh no.
I'm sorry to throw you like that, but I thought that was important enough too.
Well, it's a little bit important. I suppose it's important that you hear what's going on, so that's good. So, Forrest, the last time that we talked, and I'm going way back now, but I do remember something that stood out to me that maybe our new followers haven't heard yet. Is that you talk about your story in a way that it started before you were born, and that really resonated with me, and no one has framed it like that since you've been on. So why don't we start there? What does that mean? Your story started before you were born.
Yeah, well, it all sort of started, that realization within myself started once I started getting to know me, right? Once I started getting to know myself and I started recognizing my issues, and I decided to grab a hold of them and make some changes, right? So mainly getting sober and getting to know myself. And I had you go through the journey, and anyone who's been in recovery or is in recovery, there's a fog, there's a fog that exists,
Yeah.
and especially in those early days, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of thinking that goes on, and I couldn't figure out, like, every time, asking all those questions. Why am I like this? How did I end up here? Why do I drink the way that I drink? You know what I mean? Why do I
Mhm.
act this way? Why do I not trust anybody? Why am I so hurt? I'd think back and I'd find something, right? Be
Mhm.
like 9 years old.
Mhm.
And then I'd think a little more, and then it'd go back a little farther, and then it'd go back a little farther until I realized that, the trauma that caused me to be the alcoholic that I am, it started long before I was even born.
Mhm.
I inherited what I have, my alcoholism, my disease. I inherited that.
Mhm.
They talk about it, and they talk about how it's a family disease, and that absolutely is the case for me. My grandmother was an alcoholic and a drug addict, on both sides of my family. My grandmothers were alcoholics and drug addicts, and there's a lot of trauma. Residential school survivors, 60 scoop survivors, and my mom, alcoholic, drug addict. The man that
Mhm.
raised me, even though we weren't related by blood, same thing, alcoholic, drug addict. So it was in the nature and it was in the nurture. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I had found out in early recovery was that, when my mother was 8 months pregnant with me, she had been beaten so bad by my biological father that, she ended up in the hospital. And
Mhm.
that relationship between a child and its mother, especially when we're attached, when all the child knows is the sound of her mother's heartbeat. We get everything from our mothers at that stage before we come into this world. When
Mhm.
my mother was going through that trauma, I was going through that trauma with her. I was experiencing that trauma with her.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and so you can imagine now being beaten so bad that you're in the hospital, right? What that does
Yeah.
to you. So I came into the world with that, already
Mhm.
knowing some of the ugliness that this world has to offer. That's kind of been embedded in me.
Yeah. It's funny when you're talking about how the fog slowly clears. Now I'm over 6 years in now, since the last time I had a drink or drug, and my story is changing. It's like the way that I think that I remember things, like for some reason, like it's changing. Like, do you experience that? Like, you'll tell your story one way, and then suddenly one day you're like, oh wait, it didn't happen like that. Like, does that happen to you?
100%. Yeah. I mean,
Mhm.
much like yourself, I haven't been sober longer than I used. You know,
Mhm.
I've only been sober not even half as long yet.
Mhm.
I used for over 13 years. And I'm four. I shouldn't say only. I'm 4.5 years sober, right?
Mhm.
Um, so of course things are still getting sorted out up here. Like, I don't have it all together yet. There's a lot of things that are still pounded down in there. And I'm
Mhm.
I'm sure, like, I've talked to lots of old timers about these sort of things, and they sort of say the same things. They uncover things. It's a lifelong journey. There's no end. There's no finish line to this.
Mhm. So are you of the school that, because this is a topic of debate and it's a very, very old debate, but there is people who say that you are in recovery forever, or you can come to a state of being recovered. Like, where do you stand on that?
I think about it like this: I'm walking outside on the ice and I slip, and I'm in the process of falling, and I get back to my feet. I've recovered myself back to being on my feet.
Hmm.
I keep walking, I slip again. I fall, I get back up. I've recovered back to a. So I think that it comes in waves.
Hmm.
Today, I might be recovered because I'm solid. Today I feel really good. I can say confidently I'm recovered today.
Hmm.
Tomorrow, tomorrow I'm in recovery. Yesterday I'm in recovery. I don't think it is a
It's
it
not
is a
black and
one
white.
way. it's not black and white. It changes, man. I really do believe that, because I have some days where honestly, yeah, like I'm killing it. There's no stopping me. I'm tuned in. You know what I mean? I got my higher power with me all day. I'm plugged in. I'm doing all the things. And then other days, getting out of bed is tough, and I'm not grateful for shit. You know what I mean? I'm just acting real spoiled and ugly, and just like though there. So, but those are the days for me. I'm in recovery that day because I got to get myself back on track.
Mm-hmm. So where did, like, you were into music, you were creating music and involved in music from a young age, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I started writing songs and like I don't know. I started writing songs and singing when I was 6 or 7 years old, and I started playing instruments when I was about 11 or 12.
Do you remember any of the songs that you wrote when you were 6?
No. No. I was just always making up little songs, like I was
Yeah.
always just walking somewhere singing a song, and always, just a very creative kid.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned when we talked that there was a time in your life that you had a toxic relationship with music. Now, how did that feed your addiction, or did they go hand in hand, or what does that mean?
Oh, music absolutely fed my addiction. There was there was a time where, like, I always used to play in bands when I was a teenager, and we'd drink a little, we'd smoke a little, and we'd play, and we'd like trip out, as we used to say, and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
um but then there sort of came this moment um where I started being able to play in bars, and this was a really important sort of time in my life, because this was where I realized that I could sell my talent for alcohol.
Mm-hmm. And they prefer that. I
And
bet you they kind of pushed that on you too, didn't they?
oh man, 100%. You know how
Yeah.
many times I've been told, we can't pay you, but we can give you X amount of drink tickets and 50% off food.
Uh-huh.
Um, and that was kind of a surreal thing to me, because I was like, that sounds great. You know what I mean? Because my
Hell
nights
yeah.
my nights always end up getting there anyways.
Yeah,
Like they would
yeah.
always end up getting there. So this way is like, now I'm not even drinking on my own dollar. I'm drinking on the bar's dollar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it sort of just, it fed that addiction piece, but it also fed the ego. Because
Right.
I talk about it a lot, about how I'm also like a recovering ego addict. I
Oh.
heard somebody say that one time, and it just clicked for me, because musicians are not necessarily known for being the most humble people on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because it's very, very easy to think you're the shit when everyone's telling you it.
Yeah, yeah.
um and so, as it was feeding my alcoholism, it was feeding the sort of party lifestyle that I was living, and it was feeding my ego.
Mm-hmm.
It just was kind of a very toxic thing, and I would use performances as a way to just keep stroking that ego. Keep stroking that ego, see how far I could go. And I was delusional. I was
Mm-hmm.
so delusional and far beyond any sort of sense of reality. I was so far off the ground that
Yeah.
I was okay with what I was doing. I preferred it.
So what happened first? Did you start to realize that, like, your ego was out of control before you got sober, or did you get sober and then realize the ego was out of control?
I had always been told I was egotistical. I'd always been sort of put as someone who was like kind of cocky and kind of that sort of way. Um, but I kind of liked it. As a young man, I liked it because it sort of gave me this kind of villain sort of feeling. You know what I mean? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and I thrived on that. I liked that.
Yeah.
Um, because it was also it was protection for me. Because I would much rather at that point in my life, I would have much rather been in control of people disliking me than allowing myself to have them discover that on their own.
Okay. That's interesting.
That's an interesting defense mechanism for sure. It's
Yeah.
almost.
It was,
Go ahead for it.
Okay, Donna, turn.
Okay. I was just going to
Donna,
say,
go ahead. Yeah.
it's almost the same concept of like making fun of yourself first so that it takes the power away from those people who are trying to bully you, right? Like I remember doing stuff like that. I still find myself like talking negatively about myself to diminish the power in the room.
Mm-hmm. So let's
exactly.
Let's take a quick break here. We're going to hear from tonight's sponsors, and then we'll look at some comments. We got a lot of comments coming in on the old YouTube. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
We've watched our children walk away. We've felt hopeless, powerless. We are moms, stop the harm. We are not hopeless. We are not powerless. Stronger Together Canada is a national network of peer-led support groups to help navigate these challenges. If you're coping with a child's substance use, reach out to www.holdinghopecanada.org. If you've lost a child to drug poisoning or overdose, www.healingheartscanada.org. We're here to help, and we are stronger together.
So there's some people in the chat that are commenting how different YouTube is and how they wish they could they miss the like buttons and the stuff, and I'm like looking at it, I'm like, oh no, people don't like it, and then I look at the names and one of them is Donna.
I'm sorry. I like my emojis.
Yeah, well, I don't know what to tell you.
A lot of the times, even when I'm posting on social or like reposting something, I very rarely use words. It's all emojis because sometimes it just says it all, you know? I miss having that one-on-one engagement with every comment that comes in so that the audience feels a little bit more acknowledged. But So anyways,
I understand.
We've got Sharon Akus in the chat.
Yes, Sharon says, "Hey son, love ya."
And we've got Ella.
Ella says, "We carry many generations of burdens."
Mm-hmm.
And Twinkle Van Fleet says, "Both sides of my family too." Assume that's getting back to the substance challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And Heidi Sullivan says, "Wow, knowing that you knew about being cross-addictive is amazing."
How long did it take you to discover that, Forrest? Because that sounds like something that a sponsor, like an old timer, told you and sat you down.
Well, I think once I admitted that I was an alcoholic, everything else sort of just came in. You know what I mean? Like I could understand. I was like, oh, I'm also a drug addict. Oh, I'm also an ego addict. You know what I mean? Like it sort of just clicked. And I don't know. There was also the other side of it where I was like, I went a little too far and was like considering myself things I wasn't, because I was just like, it was like shiny and new. So I was like, I have love this. You know what I mean? I just wanted all of it. But definitely it was sort of just like that self-awareness. It was kind of like once it started coming out, it was like a broken tap. It just kept flowing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Alexander, thanks for the comment.
Says, "The full story, I feel, does become more clear as we move down the path of sobriety. I have started to journal so I can see how my prescription changes." I think perception.
I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Maybe prescription. Maybe. I don't know. And Heidi.
And Heidi says, "I used to think that anyone in a band were addicts."
Of course, like me too.
But I just like to point, or I don't know, but when you were talking about how like you got paid by alcohol instead of actual cash, I remember a couple bars that I worked at, like you could have a tab. There were so many times I did not get a paycheck after 2 weeks. It was all paid for the tab. So I think, it's not just the music profession that practices that rather unsavory practice.
So Heidi's starting.
We have a home bar in Calgary where we would play there, twice, maybe 3 times a month. And we just had a rolling tab. And it would just keep adding to it. If we had a good night, we'd just be like, oh, it's all good. The guy was cool. He just let us keep, rolling the tab over into the next time because he knew we'd see him again. But yeah, he went out of business, but I'm sure
because of you or what?
A lot of, yeah, we drank.
The one bar that I worked at that had that kind of same practice of rolling over, they ended up going under as well because like the staff were just sloshed all the time.
Turns out it's not a good business model.
Yeah. So what finally brought you into recovery then? Like if you're living this life and things were, like in your opinion, I mean, you were looking through life through rose-colored glasses for a while there, playing on the stages and drinking for free. And what did it?
Well, there's always two sides to that, right? There's the side that, looks appealing and looks like I'm doing all right. And it's like, looks like looks like no one knows what's going on inside. Then there's the other side of the story where it's the inside stuff, the stuff when it's just me and my thoughts, and I wasn't doing good. I was never doing good. I was always struggling, I was, I didn't really have a lot of safe places. I didn't really have anybody to talk to. I also wasn't very honest about stuff. I had a lot of secrets, some of them were secrets about things that I had done, but a lot of them before I came into recovery were a lot of the secrets were stuff that had happened to me that I was carrying, and they sort of poisoned the well. And so I tried getting sober multiple times before it actually stuck. I think the first time I ever tried getting sober, I was 16.
Oh, really? That's really young.
Well, I'd already been going hard for a couple of years, Yeah. And it was when my family moved from Calgary to Saskatoon, right? I left. Like I grew up in Calgary. That's where I'm from. I grew up in the northeast side of Calgary, and drinking and drugs and women and all of it. That it was weird if you weren't in that. You know what I mean? Like,
yep.
But then I moved to Saskatoon, and it was a completely different sort of scene. Like that wasn't really how it was. Like in my grade 10 class, I remember specifically being the only one who'd been drunk, who'd been high, and who'd fucked already. You know what I mean? And I was like. And then it was sort of just like the
man, I got some shit to show you guys.
You would think, but I went the other way because I was a very, very insecure individual, right? My ego was so big because I was so insecure, right? The bigger my ego was, it was a direct reflection of how bad I felt. And so when I found out no one in my grade had really been doing any of that, then I wanted to be like everyone else. I didn't want to be the other, So I tried to clean up. And then everyone started doing that stuff. So I was right back in. And then I was sort of like, oh, I know how to do this.
Yeah. Let me step aside. Let me show you some shit here.
Yeah, exactly. And then, go through high school, and I sobered up for about, for a couple of months again in grade 12, my grade 12 year, it was 2010. I sobered up for a while there. I tried to sober up again when I was about 23 or something, right after I had lost the man that raised me, my stepdad. I lost him to suicide, and I had lost my grandmother. She had, it was heart failure, and they were both, my grandmother was sober, but she was a lifetime smoker. She was also an alcoholic and a drug addict. The man that raised me, Kelly, my dad, he was an alcoholic and he was a drug addict till the day he died. That's what got him. And then I tried to sober up again. Then I tried to go the cultural route. I went and I went to sweats, and I had an elder that I was working with on a regular basis, and none of that stuff stuck.
What
it
what brought you to culture? Like, did you grow up around any kind of culture?
I didn't. I
How'd you
didn't
get
grow
there?
up with it. I grew up with I shouldn't say I didn't. What I grew up with was um a grandmother who was a residential school survivor and a 60 Scoops survivor.
Yeah.
And she had this sort of spiritual ideology that was all of the things that she liked about Catholicism, and all of the things of Blackfoot culture that she could learn and that she could piece together, and she sort of mashed them together and created this sort of belief that was well, it was just all about all about love. It was all about doing good for good's sake. It was all about taking care of yourself, you know what I mean, living below your means, those sort of things, and just really being present and living for your family. She put those things in me, but she always wore this gold cross around her neck, and she would teach me how to pray and say amen, Jesus Christ, all that kind of stuff. So it
What did
was
you feel about
really
that? Like, when she was in that,
well,
like, did you feel like even a little bit receptive to that, or was that like, no, I'm not having that?
I learned how to be spiritual from my grandmother. I did, but I always thought it was kind of strange where she would talk about residential schools, but then she would say amen, and would believe in Jesus Christ, and she had a picture of Jesus hanging up on the wall and stuff like this. That part of it never really connected with me. But then again, in the area that I grew up in, there was a lot of newcomer families, right? There was a lot of newcomer families, and there was a lot of religion around, so I grew up going to Filipino churches, and I grew up eating in South American houses with families that are praying in their languages and stuff, and with a lot of people from the Middle East, very cultural, right? Cultural dresses and wear. And so I grew up around a lot of religion and a lot of culture, but none of my own, right? No, I didn't grow up with a lot of Blackfoot culture. And that was always a big hole that was left in me. I always felt like I wanted to dance. I wanted to sing. I wanted to go to sweats. But because on the Eaglespeaker side of my family, that's my biological father's side of the family. There was a lot of drama that was there. And I just want to be clear. I have a lot of amazing Eaglespeaker relatives. I got a lot of Eaglespeaker relatives that I love so much and that show me a lot of love. But also it was tough times because on that side of the family, my father and his mother did not accept me, right? They did not accept me. I'm not really sure why, but with that sort of went my connection to culture, because on my grandmother and my mother's side that was raising me, they weren't very cultural, you know. They were trying and they were searching the same as me. But so when I was of age, and decided I wanted to try it myself, my mom always worked around, like she worked for a place in Calgary called Sunrise Native Addiction Services. My mom, who's also an Indigenous lady, she was an addictions counselor, and also had her own struggles with addiction and whatnot. But she had a lot of connections. She had a lot of connection to community. So she connected me with an elder out there, and it was a hole, right? Like I said, it was a hole that was left in me, never growing up with my own culture, never knowing how to speak my language, never really knowing what it was to be Blackfoot. But I always felt Blackfoot, like my family always encouraged that in me, and they did the best that they could. But at that point I had tried, I'd been in some youth recovery programs at my mom's addiction center. I was growing up in an addiction center, you know, and I tried getting sober a bunch of times. I even tried to go to AA meetings at one point in time before I decided to go sweats, and it didn't work. Finally, I tried to go to sweats, and again, it didn't work. It wasn't until I think I was about 25 or 26. I had a year and a half old daughter, and my wife and my daughter, they were leaving me. It wasn't until that happened and I was staring at the future of being a deadbeat dad that I decided I'm done. You know, I'm done. And then I could have done any of the other stuff. You know what I mean? All the stuff that I try to do in the past to get sober, any of that would have worked at that moment in time because I was ready. That was the missing ingredient from all the stuff before, is I was never ready.
Did you go to detox and treatment, and did you do all the things?
I didn't do any of it. I went to 12-step meetings. I decided on a Friday, I'm done. I was in 12-step rooms on Monday, and I've been there ever since.
So tell us about walking through those doors. I mean, you mentioned that you did try AA earlier on, and you tried these different things. How did it feel walking in there, being ready to buy in? Were you still scared?
Oh yeah. I was terrified.
Yeah.
I was absolutely terrified. But it's kind of funny because, you know, I understand how young people end up in cults. You know, because when I went to 12-step meetings for the first time at that point in my life, I would have drank the Kool-Aid. I would have sold the Bibles. I would have knocked door to door. I would have done anything. I was so desperate. I just lucked out the fact that 12-step programs are not a cult.
Oh, so like it could have been another room and you would have been like, yep, I'm in.
I was so fucking desperate at that point. Yeah. I was so done. I would have done and did do anything it took to get sober, man.
You think you were led to that room then?
100%. 100%, man.
So tell us about recovery then. Tell us about your first year. Like, did you do the steps? Did you get a sponsor? What did it look like?
Yeah, I got a sponsor right away. Because, you know, anyone who's been into 12-step rooms, you go in and everybody, your first couple of meetings, everyone sort of talks to you. You know, they tell you you're the most important person in the rooms, and they really lift you up, and they really want you to feel better, and it feels phony. You know, it feels phony because I'm like, I don't trust nobody. Yeah. Right. I don't like nobody.
Yeah. What do you want from me?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they keep doing it. They keep doing it, and they're asking you to go for lunch, and they're picking up the bill. You know what I mean? They are saying, I'll pick you up. I don't want no gas money. They're doing all these things. And then, so I sort of started listening, and I hear everyone, you know, they say, get a sponsor, get a home group, 90 meetings in 90 days. And I was just like, what do I have to lose? You know what I mean? I literally have nothing to lose, and I'm so desperate I'll do anything. So I didn't fuck around in the rooms when I was there at the first. I did it right away. You know, if somebody said it, I just did it. You know, it was that gift of desperation. That's what it was. You know, that was how I interpreted the word God. Because even today in the rooms, I'm not gonna lie, I don't enjoy the Lord's Prayer. I don't enjoy God talk. And
I could go off about that, man. Like that. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, but this is my point, right? Is that that stuff can still exist in those rooms, because what I'm doing is I'm not looking at God in a biblical sense. I'm looking at God as the gift of desperation, right? That's what God is to me. And I can stand with all those fellows in the rooms while they say the prayer that works for them, and I can not say the prayer and still feel connected to them, right? I can still do all that stuff. And so that's what I was doing. I got a sponsor right away. I started working the steps, and I went to 90 meetings in 90 days. That was the most important thing I did for myself in year one, was 90 meetings in 90 days.
Can you turn your camera just a little bit? You're not in the middle, and it's driving my OCD over the edge. There, perfect.
Okay.
Oh, that's so much better.
The camera's backwards too, so I'm tripping about my hat because it looks backwards and how I'm used to seeing it.
Yeah, it messes with everyone. It really does.
That's all good.
Yeah, so like, where'd the rubber hit the road for you? You walk into the rooms, you start buying in, you're hearing the things you like to hear, you're hearing the things you don't like to hear. Tell us about some of the moments that you had. Like, did the clouds part at any point, or was it a gradual progression out of the darkness? Like, tell us about it.
It's kind of, there's lots of little ones, right? There's lots of little things. I started to, I think fake it till you make it really applies to what I was doing. Because I may not have believed everything that I was doing, and I may not have enjoyed everything that I was doing that they were telling me to do. But I believed that eventually I would. You know what I mean? Like,
faith.
That was enough for me. Is I was like, eventually this will click. Eventually this will happen. Because the people that I admired in the rooms, the people who had what I want, right? They were the ones telling me to do these things that I didn't believe yet, telling me to do these things that I didn't like doing yet. And it's funny because now where I'm at, all of those things are just a working part of my life. You know what I mean? Praying in the morning, praying at night, stopping throughout the day and giving thanks and gratitude, just reaching out to other alcoholics and just, you know what I mean? Reading my book, going to meetings, all these things that used to just feel like pulling teeth. Now it's just my life.
Let's have a look at some more comments. Let's see here. Yeah, you know what? Martina's got a question here, and it was going to be the next one on my list anyway, so we'll let her ask it.
Hey, Martina Music would like to know, sometimes in recovery, one addiction is replaced with another. Do you find current songwriting is a positive replacement?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would say I obsess more over songwriting and the creation of songs. Not even just the lyrics or melody. Like, as you can see, I'm in my studio space here. I set this up so that I can write my songs entirely for myself. I got drum set up, I got bass set up, I got piano set up. It's become another form of things that I can obsess over, be addicted to, and also get my bit of control in. But the thing is when I control every aspect of my music, I'm not hurting anybody. You know what I mean? When I'm just sitting here and I'm just doing this, I'm not hurting my family. I'm not hurting my kids. You know what I mean? I don't get addicted to this and crash my car. You know what I mean? Like, I accepted at a certain point that I'm always going to be addicted to something.
Yes.
And so there's some people don't, that's some things that some people have different opinions about, and it's fine. But the way that I know in my life is I'm always going to be addicted to something. Yeah. As long as I'm not addicted to something that's fucking up my life, that's the best I can ask for, Yeah, sometimes my wife gets pissed off that I'm outside writing music till 4 a.m. and then I sleep all next day, like sometimes that pisses her off, but you know what? Like that's a better alternative.
Yeah. And
I'm sorry to laugh there, but I mean, I can kind of relate to that in many respects, because I think, without having said it before, I'm going to say it now on air, that I think this show has replaced his substance challenges. Yeah.
And like, we all want to feel okay. Like, we all want to get up in the morning and we all want to be okay. And, it's like, I don't know. I feel like maybe I got this pointed in the wrong direction early on, and why would I go out and try to feel okay and do these productive things when I can just take a pill and feel okay? You know? Well, meanwhile, my life burns down. But yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. And those of us with addictive personalities, like if we point this in a productive and meaningful direction, like you get out of our way. Like you just get out of our way because we're not going to stop. And that's how we achieve like the life that we want to live. Is it always completely healthy? No, it's not. And Forrest, I'm sure you can agree. And Donna, I'm sure you can agree. It's not always healthy, but we are pointed in a productive direction. And I'm always learning, and I'm blessed because I get to hear stories and new perspectives every single week. And I learn something from each one of my guests. So there, I think I am completely justified now. How did I do?
No,
okay. Yes, but I'm going to play devil's advocate on your wife's behalf. There are times I curse you under my breath because you're in here so much.
Oh, my wife is the exact same.
Yeah.
And that's all right. You know what I mean? We learn to forgive and move on, through that kind of stuff. But, one of the things to Martina Music to sort of answer as well is, one of the things that I had to do for myself was I also had to create myself 3 sort of songwriting categories, I suppose. Because I'm trying to I do this as a career, right? That's what I do. Part of being a career musician is being flexible, is being good to work with, is the ability to say yes, and so I may sit here and control everything. But like I said, I have 3 different categories. One of the categories is a box where I put songs that are for nobody but me. I'm not showing these to anybody. I'm not looking for feedback. I'm not looking for anything. These are songs for me, right? Then I have a box of songs that I put in where I'm like, these are songs I'm not sure about, but I'm just going to leave them in here. They're just they just exist, right? And then I have another box. These are the songs that I want to help move my career. These are the songs that I'm not attached to, that I'm not falling in love with every part of, that I'm willing to work with other people on, that I'm willing to allow other people in. Because as much as I love the control that I get from sitting here and writing every single part, and the ego stroke that I give myself sitting here laying down a bass line as a guitar player, I also have learned in my life that I need to still be flexible, and that there's a right time and place for everything, if you know what I'm saying.
So how much of your time do you spend working on music to move your career forward, as opposed to music that's just for your own spiritual growth or to stroke your ego or whatever? Like, is there a pretty even balance there, or do you have like a pile of music that no one's ever going to hear?
Well, I hope that everything at some point gets heard by somebody. But I mean, it's kind of interesting where I'm at musically right now, because I've started doing things in a much different way than I used to. Started working with this team down in Nashville, and it's a much different world than where I came from. It's a much different world. And so one of the things that I've sort of understood about my music and where I want to go and how I want to get there is that my music doesn't necessarily belong to me anymore. If something is good, then I'm much more willing to put it out than I used to be, because before I had a vision of what I wanted it to be. There was a whole control aspect to it. But
I feel that deeply, man.
Right. My mentor at the label, he looked at me and he just said, first time I was down in Nashville, he said to me, he's like, you've reached that point in your career where you have a decision to make, and the decision is, are you making music for you, or are you making your music for your career? And he said, if you're making music for your career, these songs don't belong to you. You have to let these songs go to the people who are supporting you. And that was a very eye-opening experience for me. So now I kind of write songs with the sort of idea and mindset that everything and anything could potentially go into that box of we're going to let other people in.
Mm-hmm. We got a couple more comments here. We sort of cut the comment section short here. Let's see. We've got Tommy. I think there's a typo in this one, so I hope Donna can sort it out.
Thanks. So he says, so she was a mixture of Catholic and First Nation culture. And then it asks, where are you working now? I'm thinking maybe that's... Where
is it work? You know what? I'm sorry. Tommy, we love you. And I'm sorry, Donna.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I think maybe what it is was that, so my my grandmother's belief was kind of a mix between Catholic and Blackfoot teachings. My mother was the one that worked in the addiction center, but she no longer works in the addiction center. She is she kind of does her own thing. My mom's got a whole story. We got a good relationship now, but yeah, she's not working anywhere right now.
And we've got Sharon. Sharon gets the endearing inflection. And we have Sharon. Heidi's beginning to get the endearing inflection too. Did you notice that?
I did notice that. Yes. Yeah. So Sharon says, I'm not perfect, but I'm perfectly imperfect. I do what I need to do to stay alcohol, drug free. I'm 70 years old. I've seen shit, but that don't mean I know it all, because I sure don't. Beautifully put, Sharon.
And we've got Michelle.
Yeah.
And Michelle says, your wife is amazing. You are an amazing songwriter too. Singer-songwriter, excuse me.
And we will finish off our comments for this evening with this very important question. Where can we find his music?
You can find me just about anywhere that you can stream music on. You just got to look up The North Sound.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So tell us more now. You were, before the show, you were talking about, like, I want to talk about what's going on now in my life, as far as, like, you know, like being a father, like coming back into your kid's life. How did your music career, work around that?
It works amazingly. One of the things about, because my wife and I were both artists, you know, we've always been artists, and before my wife even started singing with me, you know, we had decided very early on in our relationship that if we were to ever have kids, we would never choose children or art. We would find a way to make them both work. That's what we would do, because we both wanted children. But art is not necessarily something like I always tell, whenever I hear about someone who's an artist that doesn't have time or doesn't do it anymore, I'm always like, oh, they're going to explode. You know, at some point they're going to pop, because as creative people, we need to be creative, even if it's just for our own mental health, you know? So, but, I am very privileged to be able to bring my children on the road with me. You know, my wife and me were able to bring our children on the road with us a lot. There are certain times, obviously, where we can't bring them. But for that, my little brother lives with us. And sort of the thing for him is he lives here and he helps us take care of our girls, you know. If we go on the road where we can't bring them, they stay with their uncle, and it works really, really well. We're really, really blessed to have the sort of setup that we do.
So has your maintenance in your healing, in your recovery, how has it evolved? Like, has it changed a lot since in the last 4 years, like when you came skidding into the rooms for the first time to now?
Yeah, it has changed a lot. For probably the first 2 years of my life in the rooms, I was the first year I was 7 days a week, 2 meetings a day.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
why would I go anywhere else? You know what I mean? I'm
Nowhere
feeling
else to
good. This
go.
is work. Exactly. Um, Second year, 5 to 7 meetings a week. Nowadays, um, I don't feel the need to be in the rooms every day. I have a home group that I am dedicated to going to.
Mm-hmm.
I do step work. I have guys that I sponsor. I stay
Mm-hmm.
in touch with my sponsor. Um, because the thing is for me is where I'm at right now, and just like the recovered sort of thing, where my sobriety is going to change. Where it's
Mm-hmm.
at, there may be a time where one day I need to be in the meetings 7 days a week again. But
Mm-hmm.
right now I don't feel that way, and right now I'm out living the life that I was fighting for in my first year of sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
My kids are only going to be 6 and 2 for this time. I'm not always going to be able to they're not always going to want me to tuck them in at night. They're not always going
Mm-hmm.
to need daddy to be there. And so those moments are really important to me. And so if that means I miss a meeting at this point in my life,
You'll be all
I'm going
right.
to take that. I'll be all right,
Mm-hmm. That's something that I'm learning myself over even in this past, like I would say, even in the past 6 months that I'm learning about myself is be careful of the absolutes you place in your life on what you believe in. Because like there was a
Mhm.
time early on in my healing that, this is the way. This is the way. This is what other people should also do. I was very staunch in my vision of what healing should look like, not only for me, but for everyone else around me. And that may be a common thing for people new coming into recovery. They need to believe that. I don't know who might I say, but even in the past year, my respect in many things is shifting. Like I'm afraid to talk in absolutes because I might change my mind tomorrow and then I'm gonna look like an asshole.
Yeah, I have a hard time with having any sort of definitives in my life today,
Mm-hmm.
because one of the greatest things I think that we can give ourselves as individuals and people in recovery is to be teachable, which means that we
Yes.
have to be open to change.
Yeah.
You know, we
Yeah.
have to embrace that change. And it's funny because once you accept that into your life as a part of who you are, open to change and being teachable,
Mm-hmm.
it's amazing how much of the world opens up to you.
Yeah, it really is. So we're not quite done yet. You guys stick around to the end. We've still got that clip from next week's guest coming. But Forrest, is there anything we didn't cover, or is there anything that you would like to talk about, or anything you'd like to leave us with?
I mean, there's there's so many things. I feel like these are conversations that can go on for forever. You know what I mean? like
Mm-hmm.
like what you and I are doing. This is how these 12-step programs came to be, right? Like one addict and alcoholic talking to another one. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? There's so much that we can talk about just sitting here. But you know the biggest thing for me today that really just it hurts me, I guess, is that also I think just being affected by it myself is the amount of people that are losing their lives and are being lost into these addictions and are ultimately feeling alone. And I know we can't, all we can do is carry the message. We can't carry the drunk, we can't carry the alcoholic. But my heart breaks for people that don't that can't get here or don't know how to get here. um and I just think as individuals and people, the best that we can do is just keep ourselves as open as possible, be as approachable as possible, because you don't know you might save somebody's life.
Yeah.
I don't know, I've just had some people recently die because of this shit, and it's tough. I feel like there's so many people right now that are dying. I see shit all over my neighborhood and stuff, and it's hard not to be affected by it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, man. Well, I think we'll cap it there for tonight. Thank you so much for coming again. You better believe that I will be hitting you up down the road again. Next time, maybe we'll get you in the studio and we'll do a Friday morning freestyle. But before I let you go, I want to say tonight's live production is also brought to you in part by Prairie Harm Reduction in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Prairie Sky Recovery Center in Leipzig, Saskatchewan. To learn more about all our sponsors, check out www.hardknoxtalks.com. While you're there, check out our fresh summer 2023 merch and pick something up and show your support. I think it's amazing, and Donna thinks it's amazing. Yeah, she's nodding her head. Forrest hasn't even seen it. He's nodding his head. It's amazing. All right, man. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We'll let you go. Here is the clip from next week's guest. We'll see you all next week. Take care, everyone.
I never questioned the workings of the universe. I think it's a fool's errand. I grew up in this world that was, embedded in addiction and violence. And when I thought about this idea of like creating meaning in my life, I'm like, well, I got this big pot of shit here. And I heard my mentor say one time, the secret is to find value where value is undetectable. Like all of these characteristics of addiction that seem to hamper my existence and hamper my life, I used to turn into this strength. Like how much of my experience is constructed by social programming? How much of my experience is a repeat of yesterday? I think about the future and I get anxiety, or I project, and the best thing I can do is predict based on where I come from. And if I don't come from a nice place, I'm probably going to project something that isn't nice. Like here's the trick: the future is completely unwritten. Anything can happen. Anything.
Say, this is Hard Knox Talks.